One of the questions we got asked was, if we have hardware grid instances, can we add VM appliances as new grid members? The answer is absolutely. Most of our customers, or a lot of them, mix and match hardware and virtual. Just as long as they're not an HA pair, that's kind of the only limitation. It's a great question. Thanks for that.
Other questions that you might have? Okay, I can address this one. Kenneth Cox, thanks so much for your question. When will we see the Nist announcement for Fips? You know, that's a great question, right? We've already met all of the requirements. It's now kind of waiting on the federal government. So usually their feedback is usually 60 to 90 days. Sometimes they can go longer. So I would expect you know, in the fall, perhaps October, perhaps November, maybe it's sooner than that, but at this point, all of the requirements have been met, and we used you know, NIOS as our independent lab, and so all of those requirements were addressed, and everything was sent off actually last month. So hopefully we'll see that response coming up fairly soon. Thanks, Kenneth.
Hey, Bob, we had a question sort of asking a little bit about the differences between us and, you know, someone like an F5. And, you know, I like to kind of have that conversation because to me, you know, it comes down to a couple of things that Joe actually mentioned. He mentioned, you know, the ease of use and the integrations with all of our other DDI or DNS and DHCP and IPAM products, being able to take all the data that you have in your IPAM database and utilize that to make more intelligent load balancing decisions, right? Someone like an F5, they can look at source IP or they can look at geolocation information, but that's kind of the limit of what they can see. Whereas with you know, having all that data there and being able to act on it, and you know, makes the transition a lot easier. And you know, a lot of our customers already know how to use us for DNS and already have it in place, the infrastructure there. You know, Joe mentioned being able to license it, and Bob said about using the temp license. That's, you know, that's an easy way to test this out and see if something like a global load balancing is good for you, and without having to make a bunch of changes and put in a bunch of equipment just to test something out. Whereas if you're already using this equipment for DNS, it makes sense to be able to just say, well, I want to do the exact same thing I'm doing. I want to do DNS on a DNS product, not on a load balancing product. And then, you know, have all the correlation with the reporting like Joe talked about, being able to see all the, you know, the application state and history and all this data that we've got, be able to report on it. You know, F5 doesn't have much in the way of reporting and all that. They'll tell you to use a Splunk or use something else. So.
Yeah, Scott, that's really good. Thanks for those insights. Also, one of the things that we were talking about today in 8.3 is, you know, the certification for Microsoft Azure Government, and one of the features that enables that to happen is vDiscovery. And Joe, maybe you could just give a quick overview of vDiscovery, and just so that I'm sure there's lots of people that understand that already, but can you address that at a high level for those on the call?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, like Bob had mentioned, vDiscovery or virtual discovery is something that we've had built within, you know, the Infoblox solution for, you know, many years now. We actually built it with tight cooperation with our awesome partners, VMware. So we actually were able to do a virtual discovery using VMware's own APIs and communicate right with a VMware hypervisor or operations center, whatever the case may be. We can actually start a discovery, do a scan on all the virtual machines that are actually running within that particular environment, and pull that data right into IPAM. So now you've got a full catalog on what the virtual machines are, any host names, their IP addresses, MAC addresses, what virtual switches they're on, et cetera. So again, like I mentioned, we've had that for several years now. What we've done is we've taken that and extended that functionality up to our public cloud offerings. And we can do this both in Azure and AWS, where you can now do a virtual discovery of all your workloads that are up and running in, Amazon or Azure, as an example, and pull that same data into the IPAM database, right? So now there's no more guesswork or no more, having to maintain a separate spreadsheet of what all your workloads are, where they're located, what their IP information is. We can natively do that and pull that data directly in, right? So it's a great solution that we've extended now out to public cloud offerings as well.
Yeah, that's really good, Joe. Thanks for that. Let's see. Are there any more questions?
We've had a couple of questions kind of in relation to roadmap items and things around pricing. And I'd like to remind everybody, this forum is for general kind of information that we would advise contacting your sales team and letting them know that you want to kind of have a further discussion around DTC and a lot of it is we like to talk about the environment and understand, let customers understand what the impact of turning DTC on is and where your current environment is. So we like to kind of review where people are at and discussing price is usually between the account manager and the customer. So we would advise doing that, but we would be happy to have further conversations with you around that and around roadmap items as well.
Okay, are there any other questions? Again, we do have it looked like a couple of other things that popped up. Did you see, Scott or Joe, did you see those questions?
Yeah, so one of the questions is around DNS delays and what, as you move things or upgrade things, and the DNS delay is typically taken into consideration when setting it up. So when you kind of decide on the TTL, kind of that determines how long that record gets cached before the next time the client does a DNS query. So sort of determining, the shorter you have it, the faster it'll be, but of course, then the less caching you have, the more traffic there is. So there's kind of a fine line to sort of understand based on the application you're trying to deploy, how you'd want to set that up.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. A special thanks to Scott Friedman and Joe Briante and Srinivas Penamuka behind the scenes. Again, thank you for attending today. Please watch for our follow-up email, our free offers, and also for announcements to join this SE DTC Tech series in the months ahead. We will have more technical information and conversation around DTC. We appreciate your interest in Infoblox DTC, and we'd like to wish you a good day. Thanks for joining us. This concludes today's presentation.